I do think Zulawski is probably my favorite consistent director right now. I don't think there's many of his movies that I've seen that I don't love. This one is okay. The most important thing is love. Not my favorite, but I think these three movies are so good, and I'm expecting this movie to be more like these three than this. Let's go for some Zulawski.
Michał? Co ty tu robisz?
Something's weird about to happen. Okay. What is this leg itching thing? They've all been doing it. I didn't point it out in the beginning.
Kiedy wojna wybuchła, mój mąż także nie miał niczego. Chciał się dostać na pocztę bez skutku. Powiedziałam mu, by zaczął karmić.
Feeding lice is a job. Alright, let's pull this up and look. So this is a real thing. A loose feeder, and this is Polish, so I'm guessing this was really a Polish thing, was a job in interwar and Nazi-occupied Poland and associated with Krakow, Poland. Loose feeders were human sources for blood for lice infected with typhus, which were then used to research possible vaccines against the disease. Research into the typhus vaccine was started in 1920. During the Nazi occupation of the city, louse feeding became the primary means of support and protection for many of the city's Polish intellectuals. Oh, interesting. So if you fed lice as an intellectual, you could protect yourself from the Nazis. When the profession carried a significant risk of infection from typhus, loose feeders were given additional food rations and were protected from being shipped. So basically, if you took this thing, you could escape slave labor camps and German concentration camps. Typhus research involving human subjects who were purposely infected with the disease was also carried out in various Nazi concentration camps. So French bacteriologist Charles Nicole showed in 1909 lice were the primary means by which typhus bacteria spread. In his experiments, Nicole infected a chimpanzee with typhus, retrieved the lice from it, and placed them on a healthy chimpanzee who developed the disease shortly after. Further work established that it was lice excrement rather than bites which spread the disease. He received a Nobel Peace Prize for this. During World War One, a Polish parasite person was drafted in the Austrian army and given the task of studying typhus and its causes. After Poland regained its independence, he was hired in 1920 as a professor of biology. There, he developed a vaccine against typhus made from grown lice, which were then crushed into paste. So basically, he developed a vaccine by crushing lice. Initially, the lice were grown on the blood of guinea pigs, but the effectiveness of the vaccine depended on the blood being as similar to humans as possible. Oh, so that's why you need to feed. Dude, this is like some fucking metal shit. That's crazy. As a consequence, by 1933, Weigel began using human volunteers as feeders. While the volunteers fed healthy lice, there was still danger of accidental exposure to some of the typhus-carrying lice in the institute. Once the lice were infected by the typhus, they required additional feeding, which carried the risk of human feeder becoming infected with the disease. He protected donors by vaccinating them beforehand, and although some of them, including Weigel himself, developed the disease, none died. However, the protection of the vaccine was still a potentially dangerous activity, and it was still difficult to produce the vaccine on a large scale. At the time of Weigel's vaccine was the only one in existence which could be employed in practical applications outside of controlled settings. I see. So this is based off... So this guy was a lice person. This is the story. It's based off this. At the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union in 1930, he initially came under Soviet occupation. Oh, okay. So this is actually under Soviet. So it isn't just Nazi Germany. It's actually Soviet people. During this period, his institute continued funded, although Poles, particularly those escaping the German-controlled areas, were banned from being employed there. The Soviet authorities deported ethnic Poles from the seized territories, sending them to Kazakhstan, Siberia, and other areas deep within Soviet Union. Nevertheless, despite the official prohibition on employment, Weigel used his prestige and influence to secure the release of the several Polish would-be deportees. In some cases, managed to obtain permission to those who had already been exiled to return. These individuals were then given work in the institute as either nurses, interpreters, or some of the first lice feeders. People were also given a job by means of protecting them from persecution from Soviet authorities. The vaccine produced by this institute during this time was earmarked for the Red Army, aside from a small quantity used in the civilian center. After the Nazi attack on the Soviet Union, this city was taken over by Germans. It was kept open because, like the Soviets, Germans were interested in the application of typhus vaccine among their front soldiers. This institute was made directly subordinate to the German military, which, it turned out, ended up giving workers significant protection against the Gestapo. The Nazis converted a building of the former Queen Grammar School into his new laboratory and ordered that the production of vaccines be stepped up and the whole output of being shipped to the German armed forces. Additionally, began employing members of the Polish anti-Nazi resistance in his institute, which provided them with sufficient cover to carry out underground activities. Due to his special bit, was allowed to have a radio on the institute. Otherwise, ownership of radio by Poles was punishable by death, which was used by him and members of Polish resistance to gather up-to-date news of the war, otherwise censored by German propaganda. When Germans began the systematic murder of Low Jews, Uyghur tried to save as many as he could by hiring them as well. Among others, work as the institute saved the life of bacteriologists. He also tried to protect the bacteriologist, blah, 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 by offering him a position. However, Eisenberg believed he could survive the war by hiding in Krakow, turned down his offer, and in 1942 was caught by Nazis and sent to the extermination camp where he was murdered. In the end, about 4,000 people passed through Uyghur's incident, of whom 500 are known by name. So why is typhus... This is what I want to know. Why is typhus so big? Typhus was endemic in Poland and several neighboring countries prior to World War I, but became an epidemic during the war. I see. So it mostly was in Poland, but the war brought it around. So basically, because of the war, typhus spread really quickly. So Anne Frank probably died of typhus too. So in a way, the typhus was one of the biggest killers of the World War II in a way. So that's why their legs are itchy, because they had lice literally just nibbling their fucking feet for blood. Let's see if we can see some feeding. So wash yourself, then put those straps that seem like... I never understood what those straps actually do. Box of lice, you think? Ooh, that's gnarly, that's gnarly. Oh, okay. Oh, so you're putting lice like this. I mean, that means it's free-for-all. Some of the lice aren't going to get to eat. Okay, I'm not going to lie. For some reason in my brain, I thought you just put a bunch of lice on your feet and your legs, and then someone would come over and pick out the lice slowly and drop them into a jar. This makes way more sense. Way more in control. Otherwise, the lice would just be, like, fucking flying everywhere by themselves. I wonder what I would be thinking of this scene if I... because it was kind of abstract, right? And I just was like thinking to myself, all right, I need to check this thing out. But if I never checked this thing out and then just this scene came up randomly, what would I even be reacting
Nie
to?
wolno ci się drapać, Marian. Ona od
I'd be
tego
like,
umiera.
wait, is this fucking thing real? Oh, Jesus Christ, they're all filled up. I mean, there is something incredibly interesting about the horror of lice feeders and how it helped them escape concentration camps. Because, like, if you watch something like Schindler's List is, like, super heroic. Everything in the movie is so beautiful. Yeah, this guy's having a hard time, but he's doing something great. Here, you don't even get credit to the guy. This is really a horrific job of feeding your blood to lice, and it looks pretty horrific. But in reality, this thing did save a ton of people's lives, and that juxtaposition is pretty crazy. And I feel like this film completely recognizes that process of feeding lice is not a job that's for heroism. Therefore, we don't heroicize the lice feeders at all, even though they did literally save a bunch of people's lives. It is a heroic thing. This whole organization. As a movie director, I guess, like, for Zulawski, he definitely captures this, holy shit, there's something so gnarly about this job, and then it can save a bunch of people's lives. That juxtaposition must be crazy. Obviously, since this is based off the book, it does make me wonder if the book recognizes this type of juxtaposition too, that, oh, my life is being saved, but giving lice blood as a job is fucking gnarly. I don't think I could read the book though. It's probably in Polish. Because at least when you're looking online, I feel that most of the news was pretty positive. But yeah, I'm going to probably watch some videos after this to see like what people thought. I feel like people will only talk about it in a historical understanding and not in a personal experience. Oh, people did this out of desperation. They didn't want to feed the lice. The lice were disgusting. Stuff like this. I mean, this is the first Zulawski film I've seen that's based on true events. So it is kind of unique in a way, because he's like documenting and showing a reality he sees instead of oh my god, it's coming out. How do you keep them from flying around and going crazy? I do like how in the reality stuff Zulawski is because he's, you know, as I mentioned before, he's very intentional with his filmmaking. Everything feels very planned. So even in reality, you can feel like exactly what he's trying to show. So what is this? Because from what I can tell, you get lice by smashing the lice together to be... Oh. Dude, this is a fucking crazy fucking scene. Yeah, I mean, the horror in this movie is so unique. Obviously, everyone is stressed out about the concentration camps and being arrested and being in an occupied region. But the fact is, all the visual horror is the lice feeding. That does feel more horror-inducing in a way for a viewer, I feel. I don't feel like when they're talking about the issues of society, as a viewer, you're like, oh my god, this is horrific. When they're talking about the lice sucking their blood, then it's pretty horror. When in a way, should it be the reverse or the opposite? Should we be more scared because they're living in occupied Poland and they could be sent to the to the concentration camps, and then be less scared of the lice because the lice are actually saving them? Like this. This should be what's max horror, right? And the lice is what's saving them from this, basically. Alright. I see, so you break up the lice, you kill it. That's the lice head. And then you get all this human blood gut juice. Damn, it's crazy that lice are like translucent. I wonder what the evolutionary reason for lice to fill up and become blood and then become red is. To tell each other that they're full so that they don't have to compete with each other, maybe? So humans, when we eat and our bellies get full and they're big, is there like a revolutionary reason for that? Or is it just because there's food in us so we become full? I guess you can't really tell. Like, if you're walking on the street and someone comes out of a restaurant, you don't go, oh, I can see this person's stomach is bigger. Or can people tell? I don't know. Oh, this person's stomach is bigger. He must have had a great meal. I thought we could watch some films on the lice, because I'm kind of curious what the fuck the lice are.
We're told that little things are sent to try us. Perhaps one of the most trying is an apparently friendly little creature who clings to us like a brother, only more so. He's a most irritating chap, as you'll find if he happens to run across you. Still, we can avoid him if we know his favourite haunt.
I mean, is this how we talked about lice back then? Is this how the British talk? Oh yeah, he's the most irritating chap. That's wild. You're talking about fucking lice, my friend. Why are you calling him chap? What is wrong with you? They're fucking enemies.
Let's take a peep behind the seams at one of them. Here he is in all his glory with several friends and relations.
I thought this was a fighting lice loose control. I feel like if they made a propaganda film in World War II about fighting the Germans, they wouldn't span on like a bunch of Nazis and be like, in all its glory, these fine chaps are about to kill us. I thought this has to be more combative. You're a fucking war control information video. Why are you being so polite?
They have a number of aliases. Chats is one, Cooties another, but Seam Squirrels is the best, as any old soldier can tell you.
Cooties? Did I hear cooties? Cooties and lice. Cooties is a colloquial slang for lice. What?
For one of their favorite hideouts is in the seams of clothes. However, we are going to call them by their official name, lice. Their favorite game is Happy Families, as you'll see if you examine a shirt where they're entrenched. You'll probably find that each corner has been used as a nest, and egg production is in
Dude, the
full
eggs are
swing.
so gross.
Under the microscope, the eggs appear like grains of rice. The louse lays the
British people do not eat rice if they think this is fucking rice. How is this rice? It's fucking translucent. I feel like if I picked this up and squished it, it would squirt out fucking juice. When the fuck does rice do that?
on mass production lines. They hatch out very quickly, the warmth of your body acting as an incubator and saving the mother from any further responsibility. Once out, the youngsters are full of life, eager to take a stroll in this grand new world. The seams of vests, pants and shirts are the highways of the lice family. It'll be bad enough if they'd only keep still, but they won't. Because they won't, you can't. So it's scratch, scratch, scratch all day. Here they are on the human body, which supplies them with warmth and food, without which they must pine away and die.
Damn, you can fucking see the blood pumping. It's crazy. Look at that. Why are they translucent? It's so weird.
Hardly a thing of beauty, is he? All the same, you'd hardly believe that this small beast is capable of killing grown men. But it does, by means of these diseases: septic skin infection, relapsing fever, typhus, trench fever. Septic skin infections. The intense irritation caused by the bite of a louse naturally makes you scratch. Septic inflammation of the skin may easily follow, leading to pimples, boils, and even widespread blood poisoning.
So I get septic skin infections then. I didn't realize, is it because of lice? Maybe I do get lice. What the fuck? I also thought lice was always in the hair. I didn't realize it would get to your body.
Relapsing fever. Lice, when they bite, suck up blood, and so pick up the germs of certain diseases which they pass on to healthy men. By squashing a louse so infected, its blood gets into the pores of the skin, and so relapsing fever is transmitted.
I see. So you accidentally kill a louse
Typhus
or a lice while you're scratching. You actually infect the fucking blood into yourself and kill yourself.
Trench fever. These diseases are transmitted through the droppings of infected lice. These little pellets, left on underwear or on the skin itself, may get rubbed or scratched into a man's skin, so that he in turn develops the disease. The pellets may be a direct gift from the louse, they may have been left in a borrowed shirt, or they may even be blown about in the dust. History is full of disasters to great armies in the field caused by this tiny beast. For instance, lice killed them.
Lice killed them.
Lice spread typhus amongst these.
These.
Lice, not bullets, caused their death.
How come we can't name them?
Lice murdered them. Typhus, spread by lice, destroyed 500,000, and with it always went relapsing fever. Trench fever, spread from man to man by lice. Endless suffering, needless waste of manpower, all brought about by this small murderer alone. When living in barracks, by regular attention to personal cleanliness, one ought to be able to avoid lice altogether. it's surely not difficult to keep clean. Every inducement is offered to make individual cleanliness not only a habit but a pleasure. But everyone must play his part. Sleeping quarters with polished floors and individual lockers encourage the self-respect which some fellows are inclined to shed on joining the forces.
So in America, when I was studying there, I met people who are called crusties. Basically, the idea is that they don't shower and therefore they form crust in their armpits or whatever. Okay, that's like maybe the derogatory term. I mean, crusty is a derogatory term. Their defense of not showering is because it was too cold and they would never sweat, so they would never smell. So like, why would I need to shower? It's like a waste of water. And I actually thought I bought into it. Watching this, though, now I realize why everyone was fucking promoted to take showers. It was a fucking lice problem. You needed to get people showers so they would not get lice. Well, okay, to defend myself, I bought into the idea of environmentalism. Like, if we don't need to shower, then why do we waste water? It made sense to me. I'm sorry. I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for this woke content sometimes.
Blankets, for instance, are a personal issue. Keep them to yourself. The periodic cleansing of these in a modern disinfector should do much to remove the risk of unwanted passengers. As your blankets are sealed up and then subjected to steam at very high pressure, any stray louse is liquidated. The regular laundering of your underwear gives every chance to a man, but none to a louse. Cleanliness is really a very easy job, but it's always possible for someone to spoil the show. Consequently, a check has to be kept. For instance, it isn't for appearance sake alone that one's hair should be kept reasonably short. Human hair is a favorite nesting place for lice. Now that man's letting the whole side down, and amid ideal conditions too. In the field, of course, it isn't so easy to maintain ideal arrangements for cleanliness, yet obviously we dare not let the louse get the upper hand. At regular intervals, everyone should be inspected, for lice are no respecters of persons. One shirt's as good as another, and they frequently take up lodgings in the one next door. It's vitally important that all men of a platoon or company be inspected at the same time, on the body and in the clothes. As if they're missed and they happen to be harboring lice, they'll continue to infect their clean comrades, and all the good work will be wasted. Trousers have to come off, of course, but not for universal exhibition.
What is going on?
There are some hard cases who'll always try to dodge the column. Others, perhaps on fatigue at the quarter blokes, may have been overlooked. Round them all up, for your own safety. Spread the net wide. Let nobody escape. As often as not, it's just these men, whether they're aware of it or not, who may be the cause of the trouble and whose absence makes the whole inspection a waste of time. There you are. And there he is. A favorite spot, the armpit. Of course he's surprised, shocked, indignant. The innocent party always is. Not like the hardened case. Now, the Army has made special arrangements to help you in this fight against lice. On realizing their presence, the MO calls the Field Hygiene Section, an RAMC unit.
That was like a huge story about like, oh, we're shit-talking fat people or something. I would be the one with lice. Long hair, armpits. I would definitely be late for the inspection. I felt that was a personal attack on me. And I'm fat.
The charge of a specialist hygiene officer, with qualified sanitary assistants mounted on motorcycles. Lorries with equipment and personnel. A portable disinfector mounted on a lorry, all prepared to tackle any hygiene problem which may arise in its allotted formation. Arriving at the camp, it goes immediately into action, and while quarters are being sprayed, the portable disinfector, the mobile equivalent to the permanent one we saw at the barracks, makes a thorough job of all blankets. Meanwhile, the medical officer has summoned the mobile bath unit, a Pioneer Corps unit with all the equipment of a bathing and disinfesting establishment packed on 3 lorries. The most elaborate section is perhaps the portable disinfester, with its burners, framework of tubular steel, and double canvas covering. By the time it's erected, the dressing and undressing tents and showers are also ready. The mobile bath unit's job is to bathe, barber, and disinfest all troops of the formation for which it works. But it's also on immediate call for such emergencies as the present, and can be set up where the troops may readily be brought to it. On debussing, the men make their way to the undressing tent.
The undressing tent.
Before removing his clothes, each man receives a numbered disc to avoid any confusion of clothes, and a Dorothy bag in which to place his personal property. As soon as battle dresses are removed, each is threaded on a rod, numbered to correspond with the disc issued to its owner, and placed in racks in the millbank disinfester. Shirts and underwear are dealt with elsewhere. Meanwhile, at the rear of the disinfester, the formidable heating apparatus is getting underway. As soon as the compartments are filled, the flaps are laced up, and goodbye to any lice in those uniforms.
I mean, because we have Zulawski's fucking film on mind, if those shirts were people, that's yeah, kind of a dark fucking turn.
Suit being without pockets.
So he's hiding the penis, just so everyone knows. That's why we're looking at the feet. If you look up a little, we'd see everyone's dick and balls. But unfortunately, this camera guy's too smart for us. Because that's what we want to see, right? Dick and balls. Also, like, lice definitely hide in the dick and balls, right? So they would definitely get it radically checked out. Unless you were forced to shave off all the pubic hair on your dick in order to prevent lice from happening. But they would still have to check it.
Will be worn on the ankles. The shirts and underwear are dumped in a basket to be taken by lorry to the mobile laundry, and Dorothy bags are handed in for safekeeping. Aha, you didn't think the sergeant would spot that long bob, did you? And going to the other extreme, kindly leave your boots on the mat before entering the bathroom. Of course, it's only in warm weather that the showers are set up in the open. And as the water supply can be regulated from really hot to stone cold, there's no fear of any man taking a chill.
Look at this crazy camera angle that he's doing. All dicks avoided, but we can see butt. I mean, that's pretty fucking skilled. Not gonna lie.
While the men are thoroughly enjoying themselves under their shower, their boots are receiving similar attention, but with disinfectant. Lice will wriggle their way into boots, and that's why the inside must be sprayed as thoroughly as their owner's outside. Even the duckboards have to be disinfested afterwards because little strangers will sometimes stay behind. After a brisk toweling, you really begin to feel clean and wholesome again. By this time, battle dresses have been thoroughly disinfested, and as each man collects his own, identified by the disc number, he's issued with a clean shirt and underwear. At last he's free from those loathsome little pests. As you exchange your numbered discs for personal valuables, you somehow feel different, clean.
You somehow feel different. Like they're making this seem like an entire transformation. I don't know, maybe showering is too normal for us in today's society. I will say, maybe when I go to public baths, they're pretty fun. Let me take that back. When I go through a public bath and I come out, I am transformed. I'm like, wow, I love public baths. So maybe I become a new man. Maybe this fighting lice video is way ahead of its time.
And while you return to your fellows, minus that everlasting irritation, the bath unit will be busy cleaning up in case any unwanted gifts have been left behind. The hard case again. He would miss the lorry. Well, he'll have a long walk. Still, he may be able to thumb a ride.
This guy is so sad. This guy is me. This guy's me. Why is there humor in this? I don't get it. It should be more combative, no? Where's the music of like, dun dun dun, we gotta kill the lice? But this is like some fucking Golden Girls? I don't know. I don't watch TV, so I can't think of something. But there was this show that in America that everyone talked. It's not Jersey Shore. It's like a small town, little old 1950s TV show. Small town sheriff show, 1950s. Andy Griffith, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, sorry.
Ah, not that one. That's the bath unit lorry, carrying those dirty shirts and underwear to the mobile laundry.
Oh,
That
no.
driver should never have pulled up. He's carrying a dangerous cargo, and all other passengers are barred. But just as some fellows are quite happy traveling with a consignment of TNT, others are equally indifferent to a load of lice.
Oh,
The
no.
lice have other views, however. Here's a chance to get back to warmth and good food. And do they take it? Of course they do. And so you see, a whole day's work goes for nothing. For thanks to the careless
What the hell? This is such a big story plot. What a huge twist. Are they going to have to do this again?
indifference of one man, we're back where we started. At the mobile laundry, an Ordnance Corps unit, the dirty underclothing is first of all disinfected to kill any lurking stowaways.
It's funny that they just throw it on the floor. I guess it's not, the goal is not to clean the clothes, right? It's to get rid of the lice. So technically, yeah, the floor is clean. Unless the lice get onto the floor. Are they not scared of that?
It's then washed thoroughly and scientifically in an up-to-date steam laundry. Once inside, it's hard to realize that every section of the plant is on trailers. Even the boilers are on wheels. And electric power is supplied by a mobile generator. While the washers are of the modern rotary type. All this may seem very elaborate and expensive to defeat such a small beast as the louse, but remember what disaster and destruction he can cause, how cunningly he digs himself in.
In Century of South, they talk about the washing machine being invented in the 1960s, but this is basically a washing machine. So basically the washing machines existed way longer. It's a bit of a lie to say washing machines were invented in the 1960s. They just became more commercialized and smaller. But this looks like an incredible washing machine back in the old days.
If we're not constantly on guard. After a thorough washing, the clothes go into a hydro extractor driven by electricity. As its name implies, the hydro extractor removes the surplus water from the clothes.
It's a dryer. It's called a dryer. What the fuck? Why do you need to call it a hydro I see. Hydro water extractor. I guess back then they didn't view it as drying. They viewed it as taking water out.
As to how it works, but it does work, and the clothes are then passed on to an equally ingenious mechanical dryer.
He just said, I don't care how it works, or it does work.
We needn't go into technicalities as to how it works, but it does work, and the clothes are then passed on to an equally ingenious mechanical dryer. As the garments dry, they're automatically released from the rack, and then...
Oh, so there is a dryer. I guess when you take out the water, it's not dry enough. I mean, to be fair, some dryers need this. I know some dryers that don't dry for shit these days. They need a hydro extractor put fucking back into those washing machines. We'll see if this is interesting. If it's not, I'll fucking...
Today we're going to talk about a book which is a story of 2 world wars, a disease which over the centuries killed millions of people, breakthrough scientific achievements, and 2 brave, outstanding scientists and many other extraordinary people. The book is called The Fantastic Laboratory of Dr. Weigl, How 2 Brave Scientists Battled Typhus and Sabotaged the Nazis. And the author, Arthur Allen, is with me right now. Hello, Arthur. Thank you so much for joining me today. Arthur Arthur Allen is a science correspondent for KFF Health News, and he's the author of not just this book, Vaccine, the controversial story of medicine's greatest lifesaver, was your first book, your previous book, I understand, before Dr. Weigel.
Can I turn these subs off?
Right.
All right.
And I also wrote a book about tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
Yes.
Yeah, today we're going to talk about this story, a story which is at times heartbreaking and tragic, but also truly inspiring.
This is what I feel is an important part of what people are not talking about the movie. She said exactly what I'm thinking. Like, it's a tragic story, but it's also inspiring at the same time. Very, very interesting stuff. And I feel with Zulawski's horror, he really is able to bring that out, that it's a tragic story, but it's inspiring because it saves so many people. And that's kind of missed out on a lot of the conversations and reviews that we've been reading.
Fascinating. And I would like to sort of start from the end and ask you, how did you gather the material for this book? How did you come up with an idea of writing a book about two Polish scientists?
Yes. Well, when I was writing my vaccine book, I had a few pages about efforts to find a typhus vaccine during World War II. The vaccine book was mostly focused on American researchers and scientists and vaccination programs. And so I only dipped my toe into it. But it did lead me to both Ludwig Fleck and Rudolf Weigel as very interesting scientists. And eventually I kind of circled back around to learn about them and just thought that it was a fascinating story. It's really two stories, but they are related. And the two scientists had a relationship, had worked together and had sort of parallel experiences during both wars, actually, World War I and World War II.
So in a few words, who was Rudolf Weigel and who was Ludwig Fleck?
So Weigel was the older of the two. He was born in 1880s, I think.
I think, yes.
80, yeah. And, sorry. He was actually of sort of, I guess, German descent or blood, as the Germans would say. And he was born in what's now the Czech Republic, but was quickly, was educated in Lviv, which was, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then worked for the Austro-Hungarian Army's medical sanitary services during World War I. And he actually was trained in zoology. In fact, people have criticized the title of my book because he wasn't a doctor in the sense of a medical doctor. He was a zoologist. And but so he quickly, during World War I, they all became very absorbed in some kind of protection from typhus. Just before the war, a French scientist had sort of confirmed that typhus was spread by lice, which were, these vermin, which, it's very common nowadays for children to have head lice.
Yes.
But they're a slightly different organism than body lice. And luckily for us, because head lice don't carry these very dangerous diseases like typhus and trench fever, as it's called, and other diseases.
So this is why I think of lice as a head lice, because apparently this body lice stuff has been, I can't tell, are they destroyed? So does body lice no longer exist? So with places where showering is not so big, it's still a big problem.
Disease that occurs in very dire circumstances, where people are wearing the same clothes constantly, because body lice live in your clothes, and then they jump off your clothes and feed on your body, and with that their excrement actually can contain these bacteria, typhus bacteria or others, and so there have been great, the typhus was a sort of an endemic disease. It was a regular occurrence in many cities, in before, going back to probably the 16th century or earlier, but uh, it really would break out in huge epidemics during times of war and great hardship, when people were freezing and undernourished and living, in close proximity, in the same clothes for long periods of time.
Yeah, you even at some point you write typhus corresponds with social collapse.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So when you read the accounts of the post, the Russian revolutionary period, and the years after that, are sort of the most striking example that you can read contemporaneously. Although there was also typhus in Napoleon's army, coming back from Moscow, which they invaded, in whenever that was, early 19th century, and they've found traces of it in DNA in the bones of some of these soldiers buried along the way. But in Russia, at that time, and also in the Ukraine, and in Poland, sort of at World War I, by this point, the public health community knew that the disease was spread by lice, and so there was more of a concerted effort to de-louse people. In World War I, there's almost any book you read about the battlefront, the front lines in World War I, you hear accounts of delicing, of soldiers sort of picking the lice out. Yeah, I'm going on. I could go on for a long time about that, but
But producing a vaccine was a huge challenge. Why was it such a huge challenge to microbiologists to come up with methods of producing an effective vaccine against typhus?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And, so the up to when we're talking about this period of World War I, vaccines there were some very new efforts to make vaccines. There had been a smallpox vaccine, which was a very specific way of producing it, which was that you basically scraped off, you grew it on cows and used their this material, and then they were starting to develop bacterial vaccines by growing the bacteria sort of in different kinds of soup, if you will, and they tried to do that with typhus, but it turns out they didn't really understand at this time. But typhus is an intracellular organism, so it lives inside the bacteria. Inside cells, in a way that is a codependent way. So you can't really just take a bunch of typhus germs and throw them into a soup and they multiply to make something which you could then, neutralize, as was the common practice, and with sort of things like whooping cough or diphtheria or tetanus germs, which were other bacterial germs that had vaccines.
I heard in America right now, whooping cough is coming back. So, but yeah, this is your anti-vaccination type of stuff. So, but then no, it's interesting. So apparently, typhus vaccine didn't work completely well because it's an organism in the bacteria. It's not even the bacteria itself.
Really early, starting in this early 20th century, and so it was very difficult to make it. And it was Weigel who, there were two approaches by the end of by World War II. One was the Weigel approach, and one was growing it in eggs, which seemed to work fairly well. And that was the approach done in the U.S. But Weigel, had this idea that since the organism of typhus only lived in lice and people, it didn't have any other animal hosts, although now there may be other animal hosts like squirrels and things, but it was very rare. The main places that it grew were in people and lice. So he said, well, basically, I'm going to create louse farms. And how do you create a louse farm? Well, body lice, exist by feeding on people. So the farm is people. And so he established these laboratories. He did it very painstakingly and slowly, and he was very nervous about releasing his vaccine in a way because he was worried about safety issues and the things that good scientists worry about, but he was extremely careful. But he developed this, and there were this whole idea of louse feeders, people who would sit around with these sort of matchbox-sized cages. I have pictures in my.
Now I understand the hair thing, because I was kind of confused because I didn't realize lice would feed on human bodies, but now we know it's a different type of lice that does the typhus stuff. So he was feeding another type of lice. He was creating another type of lice farm than the lice we know with the hair stuff.
That had little screens, and the louse would be strapped to people's legs or sometimes arms, and the lice would feed through these screens and nourish themselves, and then he had to contaminate the lice.
So I heard that in a lot of Muslim neighborhoods, because they can't drink alcohol publicly, or at least if you drink alcohol, you're technically not being a good Muslim, right? So a lot of Muslims gather around in coffee shops, and they basically party in coffee shops, and it's basically like a super crazy nightlife type of stuff. So this is kind of a community event during World War II. You sit around, talk with your friends. In Zulawski's movie, it was probably a little more scary, but here, I mean, this looks, yeah, you're going around playing bingo with your fucking friends, and this is how you talk and have good conversation. You let lice eat you up and bite you up, and you're just chilling.
Contaminate the lice with typhus somehow, so that with the idea that the typhus germs would multiply in the bodies of the lice, and then you could harvest the lice, so to speak, and their intestines, where the bacteria were multiplying, could be.
Oh, we saw that in Zulawski's movie. Their intestines basically is moving inside the translucent, and in Zulawski's movie, it's pretty gruesome, if I remember.
Then neutralized with formalin or other chemical substances, so they didn't actually give you typhus, but rather would provoke an immune response. And incredibly painstaking. Weigel was what we would call a sort of a DIY genius. I mean, he developed all this machinery that really only applies to the production of typhus vaccines. But it involved, these little cages, a little automated way of pushing air, using a high pressure system to push a tiny amount to under a microscope, observe a needle going into the anus of a louse, and then injecting this little bolus of typhus sort of slurry into them so that it would then grow. And it's incredibly sort of sensitive, difficult, painstaking, and, expensive, really, way to make this vaccine. But it appeared to be the most effective.
We saw this in the movie. I didn't understand what he was doing. I thought he was feeding the lice blood, but it was kind of confusing because you're like, wait a second, the lice already fed. How come you need to pump in fucking red shit into them? So now I understand. That was actually them pumping typhus into the lice's butt. It does not look nice for the lice because it looked like the lice was eating that, not having that fucking typhus pumped into their asshole. So that's fucking gnarly in its own self, right? This explains way more on what we were watching, which is another gnarly scene, really.
Vaccine by the time World War II broke out.
Yes, you actually quote a very funny dialogue between Rudolf Weigl while he was still working in Przemysl, as far as I remember, under Philip Eisenberg, who was his boss. And Eisenberg was skeptical, and he said, "Tell me, sir, where are you going to get the cultures? You won't have access to the typhus organism until you have patients, and you won't get patients when there is no disease. So how is this going to work?" Weigel thought for a moment and then, with characteristic earthiness, replied, "Well, if we can get the louse to eat the germs, we will stick them up its ass." So this is one of the
Right.
funnier moments when
Right.
we read this.
I see. Brutal. Fucking brutal. We're fucking brutal. This is, even for the lice, this is very brutal. Not just for the humans, I guess. That scene, I did not understand they were sticking up fucking typhus into their asshole. That's fucking metal.
No, it's really pretty incredible. This whole very sort of, we would call it like a Rube Goldberg scheme. I mean, just wow, very complex way to get the germs into
Yes.
the bugs and then reproduce them. And so I didn't mention really Fleck, but since you mentioned Schemisch, that's where they met. They both were working in Eisenberg's laboratory
Yes.
for the Austro-Hungarian Empire during World War I. Weigel was so then after the war. Weigel returned to Lviv as a professor and had his laboratory. Fleck, I mean, it's very interesting. I found the sort of interplay or relationships among sort of Jewish and ethnic Poles, although Weigel actually wasn't an ethnic Pole, but he was Aryan, so he could be an ethnic Pole, essentially. They worked very closely together, and they had many strong relationships, but there was also increasingly in the sort of the Polish Republic between the wars, there was a lot of effort to sort of keep Jewish scientists out of the universities. So Fleck was not able to get a university position, but he had a sort of a flourishing microbiology. He was a physician, and he also had a microbiological sort of analysis laboratory, a private laboratory where doctors all around Lviv and that region would send him samples, so he could, confirm a case of diphtheria in a child or typhus or these various other things, because he had this great skill as a culturer of bacteria.
Yeah. During the war, during the German occupation, of course, at Weigel's laboratory, they produced a lot of vaccines. And of course, they had to employ a lot of Louse.
Someone explain this picture. Are they already posing back in the old days? Some people they have to look in the camera, and some people are posing like cool. Is this your cool posture? Is this model posturing? I didn't realize doctors were so fucking good at modeling even back then. That's crazy.
Feeders, so-called. Among them were a lot of Polish intellectuals, Polish and Jewish as well. There is also a very touching story of Henryk and Paula Meisel and their daughter. Meisels were also microbiologists who were employed as researchers by Weigel. And Fleck spent years at concentration camps. What was Block 50?
Right. So I will just briefly account for, all the Jews in Lviv were moved into the ghetto by the Germans when they took over in 1941, and Fleck ended up working in the hospital, the ghetto hospital, and there was a lot of typhus in the ghetto, and he tried to develop his own vaccine. No one really knows if it worked, but it was using the urine of typhus patients to try to extract antigens from it. But so then he ended up at Auschwitz for a period of time, and then at Buchenwald, and this is where Block 50 was. And This was one of the most amazing stories from Buchenwald and from the concentration camps, because he operated in the system. There was a German sort of doctor SS commander named Ding, who was sort of playing both sides of the fence. I mean, he was a opportunistic kind of sleazeball, undereducated, kind of stupid man, but he kind of could see the writing on the wall. And some of the inmates at Buchenwald who were political prisoners, many of them, some of them communists, some from other political groups, they kind of convinced him that he should go easy on them, and they helped him write these papers which were published in German medical journals about typhus, and they tried to conceal it. So there was a medical block there, which really became, when it was exposed at Nuremberg at the trials, became one of the bases for sort of establishing medical rules of medical ethics. This typhus station, Ding and the people working under him would inject patients with typhus germs, and then also they would vaccinate them. They were working with the German military and the SS, who were all competing to try to produce typhus vaccines because the German soldiers were suffering typhus at the front, at the Eastern Front, and so there was a competition to show, who could produce the most, to impress the Reich by producing vaccine that would protect German soldiers. And at Buchenwald, they had this, ridiculous series of deadly medical experiments where they would vaccinate patients with either Weigel's vaccine or a vaccine made with eggs by a German physician, or there was a Romanian vaccine that was supposedly grown in like dog livers or something. There were all these vaccines from around the world, mostly Europe. They would they would give a prisoner a vaccine, and then they would inject them with blood from a typhus patient.
So this is the human experimentation of the dark side of the vaccines, I'm guessing. I don't really know much about this, and this is all related. So in a way, even though there is something very bright and nice about Weigel's story, there's something also dark. And that's why I think it's a very fascinating story in a way. Because it is weird to have something so inspiring, so optimistic, is in itself a very grotesque event. It's not like a heroic, like, oh, Superman's coming to save everyone. It's actually kind of a weird fucking, we're taking people's blood with lice, live lice, feeding them, and then pumping them in their assholes with the germs.
You get typhus, and so it's a completely ridiculous way of testing a vaccine, and of course it never worked, and most of these patients died. And but they wrote up the results, made up the results in some cases, and so this was this thriving enterprise where there was this one block with all the typhus patients. Next door, block 50, where people like where Ding ran the show, this SS commander, and Fleck was one of a group of inmate scientists. These were doctors and scientists from all over Europe who had been taken prisoner and were in the concentration camp system and were brought to this block. And actually, they were making another vaccine there that was based on a French approach that involved growing it in the lungs of immunologically weakened rabbits. And so this is a really amazing thing to visualize. There was this whole basement full of rabbits that would be dipped in cold water. They were like basically tortured, these poor rabbits, to weaken them. And then found that if they did that, they could grow typhus germs in their lungs. And then they would harvest the lungs and somehow make this vaccine, which usually didn't work, but they apparently were able to occasionally make it work. And the scientists there, who were led by sort of the underground and in collusion with the underground in the camp, gave some of the vaccine to people in vulnerable positions, the good vaccine to some people who were in vulnerable positions in the camp. And then the rest of the vaccine went to the German army and was used by the Waffen-SS to no effect, apparently. It was fake. It was like colored water is what I think Fleck called it. And then the rabbits, probably the most important thing of the whole laboratory was that they were supposed to destroy the rabbits after they, killed them to harvest their lungs. But the rabbit flesh was like an essential, life-giving food for hundreds, if not thousands, of endangered prisoners in the camp.
Dude, this story is just getting more and more crazy, more and more brutal. Holy!
So yeah, what did the sabotage mentioned in the title actually consist in?
Well, it's a lot of this is, there's no paper. There's the paper trail on this is very small. There are a few accounts of people who were there. There was a Polish scientist, Marian Szepolowski, I think,
Yes.
Szepolowski, who ended up in New Jersey, and and worked in a hospital there, and I tried to, I talked to somebody who was the guardian of his effects, but they really didn't have anything. He wrote an article or two. They described it as, and then Fleck gave an account of coming into this laboratory and being told when he came into Buchenwald, they had started making this rabbit lung vaccine, and he looked at it and found that what they were claiming, he looked under the microscope, he found that there were these little sort of, cell-like things, and they were convincing themselves that these were typhus germs that had grown in the lungs. He looked at it and he was like, I don't think so. I think those are white blood cells. But they all said, well, don't tell anybody. What do we care? We'll just tell them, So it was very easy to pull the wool over the eyes of the Nazis. They were, we think of them as having had this incredible organizational ability and efficiency, which to an extent, unfortunately, is true. But they were also highly competitive with each other and had a lot of inefficiency and stupidity because, the whole system was based, their scientific structure was based on toadying up to the leader, not on, intelligence.
Yes. One more thing, maybe, again, in just a few words, very briefly, the life, especially of Rudolf Weigl after the war, not really a happy ending.
Right. No, unfortunately, he was kind of pushed aside. There were both because he had, as the director of this laboratory where he had worked, kind of worked for the Nazis or with the Germans. I mean, he had no choice, and in fact, did a great amount to preserve the lives of Polish, revolutionaries and intelligentsia. That was could be a strike against him when the communists took over. So he was not like imprisoned, but he was shunted aside, given kind of crummy jobs, taken out of positions of power, and there were competing scientists who were opportunistically kind of moved into his position. And then, so he kind of died without any recognition. And this was something that even when I was writing my book in the 15 years ago or so, he still hadn't really gotten the recognition that he deserved. And there were efforts to put up a plaque in Ukraine, in Lviv, because, this was the home of so many Poles, and including great scientists and mathematicians, and of course, this sensitive issue. And of course, now I don't even know what the view there is. But and then Fleck, he went back to Poland. He was a dedicated Pole. I mean, although he was Jewish, and he tried to make it. He was at Lublin University and then Warsaw. In some ways, the atmosphere was better for him because he was more clearly seen as kind of a leftist, and he said good things about communism, I think, initially. And then in 1957, when there was this kind of anti-Semitic movement in the universities, he left and went to Israel for the last few years of his life. He died in 1961.
The fantastic laboratory of Dr. Weigl, how two brave scientists battled typhus and sabotaged the Nazis. This is the book. Thank you so much for bringing this story to a wider audience outside Poland. I think we here in Poland, we still don't know enough about Rudolf Weigl and Ludwig Fleck. I think it's really worth knowing much more. Thank you.
Let's get
Again.
a movie. Let's get a movie made, Beata. That's how we should do it, right?
And I was just exactly going to say this. So Arthur, thank you so much once again for joining me for writing the book in the first.
Little do they know there is a fucking movie. We just fucking watched it. But yeah, this story is crazy. It's a crazy story. So it's funny because these medicine people are like complaining like, oh, this story is so great. It's such a under-hidden medical story. And then from my side, I'm like, dude, the movie Zulawski is such a fucking great director. What a hidden, talked about movie director. So we both have the same story, but we both think it's underrated in a different way.